Hey, welcome to another episode of Funhaus. I'm joined by a bunch of smart people. Go ahead and say your names.
Experts in movies.
You can say film experts.
We've all directed many films.
James Bruce
written,
Lawrence.
Written, directed, produced.
Can you actually, for my loader, can you have it say writer, director, Logan?
And Elyse. We're all here. Today we're talking about two things, whitewashing in Hollywood and the film Logan, which we all saw.
That's one thing.
Are you really qualified to talk about that?
I was going to say we're qualified to have one opinion, goddammit. Anyway. Go.
So I'm
jeez.
before we get into any of this.
Yeah.
Are you drunk?
No. Although maybe
I think I know what he's going to say, but...
No, I'm going to disclaim. I know jack shit about movies and production and the business thereof.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh,
So all I can do is offer questions.
I thought you were gonna say you'll speak for the Asian demographic.
With that said, this episode is brought to you by Blue Apron. We'll be talking about that lovely sponsor in a little bit. But first, let's talk about the film Logan, the last in the X-Men quadrilogy. Something or another.
Quite a few more than four.
Yeah.
Like
Seven
Decology.
Decatology or whatever. Yeah, there's
also
a ton.
by no means
Ridiculous.
the last.
It's the last Wolverine movie, or at least the last time Hugh Jackman will play Wolverine. That's probably a lie.
Yeah.
But we'll see either way, right? Who knows?
You can put people's faces on anything these days.
Film has made $156 million domestically. It's rated R. It's a 2-hour film. Had a production budget of $97 million.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Worldwide, it has grossed $440 million, easily making its money back. So it's
The red band?
it's doing good. It's probably a red band.
See some blood spurts.
A little bit of blood spurts. This is a pretty violent
That's
movie.
where all that
Anyway,
money comes from.
hey, let's talk about Logan.
Let's do it.
Since it came out 2 weeks ago. And people have been asking us to talk about it. What'd you guys think?
Fascinating.
I don't watch Wonder Woman.
So it's so easy to like. It's rough to talk about it without kind of accidentally bashing on every other X-Men film, but it is kind of the first X-Men movie that has what I would consider real good writing, and that there are characters with arcs, and those arcs mean something, and the story means something. And for the love of God, it's one of the first comic book movies I've seen where people don't say what they feel. You actually have to kind of think about the characters and their motivations, and in that context, there is new meaning to the movie. And I don't need to rant on that for days, but man, so great. It's the first X-Men movie I've seen where I actually thought about it and came to new ideas thinking about it after the fact.
My question is, do you think that you need the context of the other X-Men movies and the other movies that star Wolverine
Yes.
to make this movie better?
I think you need the context of the relationship and the respect between he and Charles Xavier.
I agree.
To have an impact emotionally with this.
Yeah, I think plot-wise, the movie can stand on its own, but like there's emotional context that's necessary, which is weird because most movies don't ever rely on that. Yeah. They're like, oh, well, we'll have to do previously on or some sort of thing to explain how the story got to this point. Yeah. But this is one of the few movies that can only exist kind of after you've gone through 9 other like superhero franchises and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So
I agree.
That's in its uniqueness, and I'm glad that someone during the creative process, I know Hugh Jackman basically came up with the idea for this. And then James Mangold, he worked with him to write and direct it. But like, it's funny because it's what I think so few other studios or creators, they'd be afraid to do.
Yeah.
They'd be afraid to do something so dramatically different that just assumes you've kind of have an emotional tie to the character.
Now, I'm kind of unfamiliar. I know enough of it, but the old Man Logan storyline was something that was always kind of interesting, where it's like, okay, it's I like when comic book creators ask interesting questions, like we have a character that can live basically forever. What happens when he gets old?
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. A good way of framing this story. I think they just took advantage of that idea where they said, okay, well, let's just get rid of all the other X-Men other than Professor X, because we need to make this a buddy comedy. But I don't know. Are you familiar enough with that story to speak on it, James? I don't. All I know is he's basically tricked by Mysterio to kill all the other X-Men or mutants, and he has to kind of live with that. And they sort of allude to that in this one, but then
it seemed like from the movie, from what I inferred, I could be wrong, is that Xavier was the one that was causing damage.
Well, he killed a lot of innocent people.
I think he killed people.
Well, wasn't there a line in there from the villain basically talking about how they put something in the water, the food supply, that basically suppressed the mutagen, and then they were like, first you control it, like first you eliminate it, then you control it. And maybe it was implicit because there was actually a fair amount of implicit dialogue.
I thought maybe that was like the mutagen stuff was unrelated to the deaths and disappearance of the X-Men, but I interpreted the X-Men disappearing and dying as Charles Xavier's dementia overcoming him, and he did something terrible,
Perhaps.
like he does when he has his lapses before he takes his medication, and he just.
I interpreted that as one of the many incidents that led to the extinction of mutants in this world.
Yeah.
Which is something that's cool about this movie, is that it's takes place in 2029, and they're just like, it's the future, right? It's just kind of the future. And stuff has happened from the world the last time you saw it, which I guess would be Days of Future Past.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Something has happened. And since that time, mutants did not live well with human beings. Battles continued, and ultimately mutants have gone away. Whether not cultivated by humanity or embattled by humanity, they're not really left. And so now it's basically Wolverine and Professor Xavier and one other mutant hiding away in Mexico, just trying to survive. Like literally, they're just trying to get to a boat so that way they can just get out onto the ocean and then just wait to die.
Yeah.
The thing that ever since X-Men 3, a little bit in X-Men 2,
The Last Stand, directed by Brett Ratner.
There was a thing they did in that movie that I don't know if we can show those. Oh, there might be some boobs.
It was a rad moment though. Very like
ahead
80s.
on that because I'm gonna have to bleep
There you
it.
go.
Been a while since
There we
I've
go.
seen a movie that had tits, just because it could.
Yeah, it is a hard R, which is fun. But there was a thing they started in Last, and that really bothered me. I mean, a lot of that movie bothered me, because it's a rush job.
Garbage.
But there was this constant thing. So
Sorry.
it's okay. Taking another step back.
All right.
Mutants have always been kind of a nice allegory for just being different. It could be it's whatever you want to fill in the blanks, like you're homosexual or you're a minority or something like that. Mutants always kind of was a nice parallel for that. And it's like, here's a nice home and a nice group you can work with and a way to be accepted or a way to like find friendship or camaraderie. And then in X-Men 3, it's like, well, if we give you a shot, we just get rid of it. Which is kind of like saying like, let's cure gayness, you know?
Like eugenics.
Sort of.
Essentially.
But the thing is, I always thought the idea was like, no, you can't get rid of the mutant gene. The mutant gene is going to overcome.
Well, that was the end of the movie. Yes.
Well, kind of. But what my favorite part in X-Men, I didn't want to talk about X-Men 3 too much, but there's a part where there's a lot of mutants waiting in line to get a shot to get their mutant powers taken away. And they're being protected by guys with guns that will shoot other mutants, but those guns make the mutant powers go away. So why don't they just get shot if they're waiting in line?
I think it's like a
Stupid.
that's a really good point. Actually,
Just act up and then get shot.
You're thinking way
And
too
move on
much.
your way.
You're
No,
I
thinking
mean, he's
way
right.
too much
I gotta
about
So
that.
that was a plot point that came back up in Logan, where they were like, oh yeah, we got rid of it. We put stuff in people's food and then we just got rid of mutants. Which I was kind of hoping it would have been like, oh, I was kind of hoping they'd do the old man Logan thing where Logan or Professor X like killed all the mutants, but they kind of hint at that.
So the movie is very vague about those types of
Yeah, it
things.
is. On purpose.
Which is cool.
Which is a blessing.
on purpose.
Which
Oh my
is
God.
cool because so many of the superhero movies, they feel like they need to explain it to you, even though there was one last summer and the summer before and the summer before, and they're still explaining it to you. It was vague because my interpretation was that this is what they did to suppress the next generation of mutants from coming along, not necessarily to turn off the mutant powers
That's what
of
I
the
thought.
mutants that were mutants at the time.
Because they say in the movie they want to control the mutants.
Yeah.
and use
So,
them as
I think it was like fluoride
mutants
water
stopped
type
having mutant babies because stuff was in the water, but they didn't necessarily stop being mutants.
I think
it didn't
that's
turn
Now
off your
they're-
mutant power.
Now they're doing selective engineering of them. To me, X-Men Last Stand, there was the bigger parable of comparing it to like Nazi eugenics, and especially in relation to Magneto. And I love the moment in that. I enjoy watching X-Men Last Stand. I said, I know everyone hates it. I have a fun time when I watch that movie. I've seen it multiple times, at least 3 or 4 times.
Here's my perspective on X-Men
Well,
Last Stand.
Sorry,
You got more?
I'm one of my favorite moments is when, only because I love Ian McKellen and I love him as Magneto and his relationship with Charles Xavier. He says to someone, "A needle will never touch this skin again," and then he shows them his Auschwitz tattoo.
Oh,
I was like, oh,
And Elyse goes,
Brett Ratner.
The only person in the
You wrote
theater
that.
standing.
This
Brett
man
Ratner.
with
Wait a
what
minute.
Brett
Stayed
Ratner
under
did
budget.
I
for
think-
Jewish people with that movie.
but
I
is
just
that a Jew wash?
what?
are
do
we?
you mean?
Did they cast a real life Jew to be Magneto?
We're not there
Oh.
yet. We're not
I know.
there.
Anyway,
Slow down,
James,
slow
James,
down.
go ahead.
That's
I
called
was-
foreshadowing. That's
I
what
was
good
like,
writers
oh.
do.
I was gonna say X-Men 1 and X-Men 2 were very heavy superhero movies, and X-Men 3 was just like a
action movie.
Whatever.
Yeah,
so when it came out, I wasn't like, they killed Cyclops!
Yeah.
They killed Cyclops! Because I don't care.
No.
And every single time a superhero movie, which is something that's so tropey and so generic and you've seen done 1,000 times, does something unexpected, I'm like, hey,
They
surprise
tried.
me.
Yeah, something.
You know, and so like,
Well, I think we're reaching a golden age in these movies right now, like with Deadpool and Logan, because what's so cool about these movies that I'm really excited about, and that's the reason I asked whether or not we needed the context of the movies, is this was reviewed really, really well by all the critics.
Yeah.
And it made a ton of money. So that means we've made so many superhero movies now that everybody's got the context that we can actually make good movies.
Yeah.
Whereas before we had 20 years of bad superhero movies, right? So it's like we're getting to that point with Marvel
It's
and,
such a Korean toaster.
and this kind of stuff.
It's diverging too, right? Where you have the Marvel style where it's like you have to fall in line if you're going to make a movie. Whereas it seems like the X-Men movies, they almost don't give a shit. They like Caliban was a different actor one movie ago.
James Mangold did an interview and he was talking about how
like,
Fox didn't tell
Nobody told
Bryan
him.
Singer
Yeah.
and did not tell him that they both had the same character in their movies and were casting them separately and using them different ways because they didn't care.
The
didn't give a
Wolverine
shit.
is nothing like this movie.
Yeah, no, the
Like
Wolverine's like
whatsoever.
it's like an action
but
movie
it's
starring
still
Wolverine.
the same people.
I was gonna say it's
It's
similar.
weird.
It's similar in the sense that it's a one-off.
Bruce, it's
But that's what I'm saying is it's a one-off.
Yeah.
It's not related to. They are not similar.
Well, it's
except
like-
that they are different.
It's like the Star Trek movie. Star Trek Beyond was an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a like
there
continuing
was
the
an arc in
overarching
there out of
theme.
obligation,
Yeah.
but it didn't really mean
And so we're
much.
basically making like I think Adam always says we're making like 2-hour television shows that with higher budgets.
Well, this to me was a graphic novel. It was the old man Logan storyline where it's like
6-issue series.
which is like a cool thing comic
Yeah,
books
like a
can do.
one
You can
shot.
say, I'm just going to do this one quick run and then it's over. And we're done with, Gwenpool or whatever. Like, we'll just move on because that chapter is over. We'll just move on and we'll just reboot the thing again. But this time it's going to be a different actor, which I think is going to be weird.
Well,
Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, say what you will about a movie like X-Men or X-Men Origins, like Wolverine Origins, but just seeing, like, being able to see the scope of his life and all the people that he's had in his life, especially with Charles Xavier too, knowing all the relationships, that's what makes it more emotionally impactful.
Of course, absolutely. Well, like I said, I think Wolverine or Hugh Jackman, I mean, regardless of whether or not he's obviously created an amazing character, but lots of filmmakers have included him. So the credit goes to everybody. But I feel like this team is very lucky to have this character to play with as they wanted to.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons I liked the Wolverine, is because I was like, whatever. He's just a character that I already know and already like.
Yeah.
So now he's out there killing people.
Yeah,
Like,
also,
neat.
also very lucky to have such a charismatic, likable actor like Hugh Jackman, who's played the character for like 15 years.
Yeah,
because for us
absolutely.
too, it's also like
And can do it in different
graduating
volumes.
him.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
us, we're connecting, I think, on the emotional level of this is somebody that we've loved seeing for this long. The actor, not necessarily the character. So it's kind of graduating both Hugh Jackman and Wolverine into their retirement. And that's why I think it's even more emotionally impactful. At least for me it was. I also love Patrick Stewart.
It blows my mind too because like Wolverine is not a character that I care about at all. Like watching X-Men growing up and reading the comics,
so stupid.
I was like,
Matt.
Wolverine sucks, and the people that like him are the most boring people on the planet. Except that now Wolverine, like,
It's
since
cool.
because of the movies, I'm like, yeah, more Wolverine
Yeah.
because of how Hugh Jackman breathed life into the role.
No, you're
Made
absolutely
him a
right.
little bit more dynamic than getting moping and getting angry and cutting Sentinels' heads off.
And sorry, Lance, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna acknowledge your. So I think context is typically when you talk about context in comic books, it's purely about plot. Like, will this movie reward the time you've spent investing in these characters? Like, will it just acknowledge? Will it pay off the time? It's almost in a soap opera way. I feel like Logan pays off context in the sense that there's actually a lot of commentary about the role of comic books and of like belief and fantasy and heroism. And that's contextualized brilliantly within the movie because X-Men as comic book series exists in the movie.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
those exchanges and and what the characters say about the comics and then how the comics even influence with the plot itself, I thought was one of the more profound parts of the film itself. I mean, apart from like the writing being very good and the characters being good, I think that Logan actually had something to say in general about comic books and comic book culture.
That's true.
And that in context of not only the X-Men movies being mostly like having some theme, but like mostly summer blockbuster fare, I thought was like, man, This movie had something to say and executed it with style and subtlety on pretty much every level. I've got a few open questions at the end.
Speaking of open questions, this episode is brought to you by Blue Apron, our sponsor for the show. That was probably my world's worst segue. Sorry about that.
The open question being, what's for dinner?
Exactly. Lawrence is so much better at this than I am.
Nice, Lawrence.
For those who are unaware, Blue Apron is a easy and affordable way for less than $10 per person per meal, way to deliver seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals such as spicy shrimp coconut curry with cabbage and rice, salmon piccata with orzo and broccoli. You okay back there?
It's delicious.
You got it.
She's drooling.
Thanks for being my hype man. Pork chops and miso butter with bok choy and marinated apple. So please check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/filmhouse. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so do not wait. That's blueapron.com/filmhouse. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
We should say it Filmhaus.
It is the spelling of this
Funhaus.
video you are watching and or listening to.
Yeah.
I did want to segue into talking about whitewashing in Hollywood.
Ooh.
But I feel like we're having some good talks about Logan, so let's just keep that
Well,
going.
we could give our final scores.
I know. I mean, we can save the whitewashing for another episode. I don't know.
I want to talk about whitewash.
What? We can
Just
keep it
put
on.
it, out of
honestly,
sight, out of mind.
I think
Let's
if-
just not think about it,
Well,
right,
I mean,
guys?
Lawrence,
we have no reason to think about it, but maybe after we see Ghost in the Shell,
Oh yeah.
if maybe that's subject of whitewashing, I don't know.
maybe
Then we can weigh in a little more on, like, did it impact the movie? Do we feel like it would have been a better film?
possibly that movie's going to be coming out end of this month
very soon.
So
I mean,
yeah,
you can tell
we could probably wait.
living in LA, it's almost like you can feel it bubble up from the ground when the marketing budget is starting to flow.
Oh, yeah.
So like there's more billboards, and I went through LAX yesterday, and that entire that graduate hallway from the movie The Graduate, not that it's a movie. Anyway, that thing is just end to end, all
Yeah.
Ghost in the Shell
Can't
posters.
pee in a bus
They
shelter
gotta
without.
blow it out now.
seeing-
My real quick thing about Logan, thing that bothered me, the one thing I did like the movie a lot. I thought it was like a solid,
It's a good coat.
good way to. It's a very nice coat. It's a good way to end the Wolverine franchise. It bothered me. We've obviously been doing a lot of spoilers in this, but I feel like they sort of sold the character a little short, or they devalued him a little bit by making Wolverine is so special in the sense that he has adamantium bones and he can heal and all these things. And they kept introducing more characters in the comic books that sort of oh, we can also do that. But in this movie alone, they had 2 other characters who had the exact same powers and the exact abilities and the exact same everything advantage, which sort of makes him not as
Are
special.
you talking about X-24 and Wolverine?
But
X-23
they're
and
all clones of him.
X-24?
Exactly. They were all related. They were all parts of him.
But this is the thing that made Wolverine special was he had they ended up going back and rewriting this, but he had the bone claws.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So he was the one person who could live through this adamantium process, and this is sort of his curse that's killing him, but it's also keeping him alive and probably saved him countless times. Or, I don't know, his body just sticks back together either way. But then when they had the little girl and they're like, oh yeah, we just put adamantium in her. Done.
Well, but
because she
it's
was a
because
clone.
they gave her it's because she's a clone of Wolverine who has the healing powers.
Sure, but when he got the adamantium done on him, he was an adult. And this is a little girl who's still growing.
So
is the adamantium going to keep growing
Right.
since it's an
I had a similar
indestructible?
idea.
That's a valid question.
I had a similar idea, and also that is further complicated by the fact that within the context of the film, it's actually poisoning him, and you can read that in layers of symbolism about his violent lifestyle, killing him or whatever. But I think the difference with X-23, and because that bothered me too, I was like, well, is X-23 just going to die of adamantium poisoning? And which also fucks up the sub-narrative of can she be saved from her violent nature and all that. Anyway, if you go to the scene of her getting operated on, I think they only covered her hand and foot claws in adamantium. I think the rest of her skeleton
I'm pretty
was
sure there's a blueprint shot of her skeleton body, and it's just an insert into her arms and insert
Yeah.
into her legs. Not that resolves your problem, the poisoning and stuff. That I think they needed to look for an excuse. The movie does this, okay? It does this, and I'm okay with good movies doing it, where they're like, it's a movie.
Yeah, no,
all right, you
that's
can
fine.
nitpick it all day. You can ask why mutants exist
Right,
if you really want
suspend
to.
your disbelief a little bit.
I think they needed to figure out a reason why his powers weren't working. And they were like, let's look at him, let's try and figure it out. how can we do it so that way it's not necessarily his fault and he's still angry about it and it fuels his kind of beastly rage and like, oh, you treated me like an animal, now I have to deal with the consequences of your actions, kind of thing. And so I think the easiest solution was, oh, well, the adamantium is what's poisoning him over time.
Sure.
Right? It took 100 years or whatever. Maybe, I guess, what would this be? 80 years or something?
Sure. A long time.
It's a really long time, but that's what that's, and I think that was an easy, simple writing solution for it, because you could also say, well, who gives a shit? Maybe they don't want her to be 100 years old. Maybe they want her to live to be 21 and then die.
Be a weapon for
and then
a
they'll
few
just
years.
clone her again and she's past her prime anyway.
And if it's not just in her hands and feet, and Hugh Jackman knows that he's being poisoned, he knows she's his daughter and she's had the same experiments done to her, that might be an emotional thing for him where he knows that his current fate is going to befall his daughter.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I don't remember the blueprints, so I'm not really sure.
I think also though, to your thing, I can't stand it. You guys know I can't stand it when a superhero movie is just a superhero fighting themselves or a variation of themselves.
I was going to bring up my next point. Was my other issue is with the villains.
That was given validity though.
The only thing though. This movie actually took the time to make it mean something.
Yeah.
It was like a symbolic enemy.
Because it was essentially the personification of his bestial nature.
When all they do is duplicate the CG model, and then
change the color
they
slider.
mirror it, and then they palette swap it, then I'm like, this sucks.
Well, I mean, I've said it 100 times to you though. The reason they did that, and the reason they do that, and the reason that humans will always do that is because of the hero's journey.
It goes back to like
you gotta fight yourself, blah blah blah.
But the problem is this is an actual thing where they build up that he's dealing with these issues, these are his problems. They have lots of scenes where Professor Xavier's talking about how you came back from it and now you're reverting, like you were a hero for a while and now you're going back to your beastly ways, which also coincides with the rise of literal beast Wolverine and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, it's Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
So it's not like Jeff Bridges versus Tony Stark or a thousand war machines floating around one Tony Stark.
I would have loved for one of two things to happen in that scene. Either A, would have been Sabretooth, because I thought Liev Schreiber or whatever was actually a pretty good Sabretooth.
He did a pretty good job. Yeah,
and I thought X-Men Origins or Wolverine Origins was sort of like it dealt with it cast a lot of good people and then did shitty things to them, like Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Yeah. Thank God he got a second chance. Would have been cool if we gave Liev Schreiber a second chance.
No, that's
and would
true.
have been Old Man Sabretooth.
No,
cool.
Korean dude.
Originally, looking into the
Daniel Henney. He needs to be in more shit.
Okay. Liev Schreiber expressed interest when they were making this. Yes. I saw not in IMDb trivia, but in Wikipedia production history, which is way more reliable.
And then my second hope would have been that they had actually put the Wolverine clone in a Wolverine leotard, which people have been wanting for a long time, only because I think it would look stupid. And I think they know it would look stupid because they've probably tried it, and we've seen fan videos where it does look pretty dumb. But it would have been like
Weapon X.
I think it would have been kind of cool.
Terrible as Weapon X.
Yeah, when they do a comic one for one, it looks pretty dumb. But I thought that would have been a cool way to say, look, here, we finally did it. It's a bastardization, but then also they establish in this world that is a world of comic books, or comic books exist in this world. And it would have been like sort of them building Wolverine, being like, we're building the comic book version of Wolverine, and he sucks.
So
the closest nod, sorry, Lawrence, I just want to say the closest nod we got to that, and I was perfectly fine with it and enjoyed, was the kids shaving him.
Oh yeah,
let's say that.
That's true.
That is a fine idea, but it does break down the tightness of the writing a little bit. In that, so the kids believed in the comics, and due to their belief, they actually made some of the comics work. And one of the subplots of the movie, also kind of within the context of comic book movies in general, was Logan is burned out, he's old, he's cynical, and when basically X-23 is like, I want to go here because the comic says this is where I should go. He's like, no, it's stupid. It's make-believe. Shut up. Except it turns out a lot of kids did that, so it ended up making it real. Their communal belief actually made something good happen. So I think in that way, the movie's saying that youth and innocence can make heroism exist if they believe in it hard enough. And I think that's paid into the fact that the kids shaved Wolverine at the end. They made him the Wolverine again.
Well, actually, the steroids that he had.
The green jar.
He was pretty juiced
That was
up.
that was the lesson I took away.
That's
from
how
this
they
is-
needed him to die at the end.
Yeah,
Again, that was kind of like the convenient.
Yeah.
It's like they're like,
That
we
was
can
probably
spend
the most
another
useless plot
we can
MacGuffin.
spend another 8 months in a hotel room trying to figure this one out, or we can just have green goo inject into him and then we're good.
What do you say, Adam?
Oh, I think it's great.
I was the one thing. I feel like the one thing that nobody talks about, what everybody accepts, is that in my opinion, I thought Patrick Stewart was better than Hugh Jackman in this movie.
Oh yeah.
I thought every
Thespian.
scene. Well, he's obviously an established actor and has been for 40 years, but
Man.
or maybe even 50. But Patrick Stewart, he was the one that resounded emotionally with me.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, I love Hugh Jackman and I love when he plays the Wolverine. But Patrick Stewart is especially good in this movie. Man, he's so.
When he said this was one of his better days, I lost it.
Yeah, it was just like.
Couldn't.
She was crying
Some of
next
the
to me in the
looks.
theater, and then there's a point in the movie where he says something that harkens back to a conversation he and Logan had earlier.
That killed me.
And all the blood in my body, it was like I had just gone over the top of a roller coaster, and I was like, I went.
Someone
No, yeah, but again, it's built on the emotional context that you've had with him.
Yeah.
Professor Xavier is a character who's almost always in complete control.
Yeah,
There's a couple
yeah.
times during the franchise where he's like, and they always use that, like, oh no,
the
he's out of his
70s.
wheelchair or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but for the most part, he's like, he always has a plan,
Right.
And if something's going wrong with him, he at least knows that everyone else will be okay and stuff like that. And this is the movie just.
So
Throws
sad.
that out the
It's so
window.
sad.
But if you don't have that context of who Professor Xavier is, but I'm just happy these movies exist. I'm happy Deadpool exists,
Me
and
too.
I'm happy Logan exists. I'm not happy about everyone going like, let's make R-rated superhero movies now because they're missing the point.
Yeah.
It's R-rated because the filmmakers said, let's really figure out what makes this character tick and just go down that path, right?
And see what happens.
And see what happens. They did the same for Deadpool.
Yeah.
Let's just go down that path and see what happens. The end result was an R-rated film just because, right? Just because. Now, if they just go out of their way and they're like, oh, well, R-rated films, because that's what happened with PG-13. They're like, we can only make superhero movies if they appeal to the entire family. That's the only way they'll be successful.
Well, the
but then you end up
original-
selling other characters short
Right.
that don't fit within that thing, and you're not being true to the characters.
So the original X-Men came out late 99, early 2000. So if you were a 2-year-old toddler who saw the first X-Men movie and was PG-13, you're now of age to see a rated R movie.
Oh, that's true.
It's like we are now at the point where 2 decades have gone by of people growing up with these characters. So I think it's not out of the realm of reality that you can do a rated R movie and the people who grew up with these characters can actually watch those films.
Well, they've proven it twice
There's
Yeah.
also the surgery,
Yeah.
by the
So
way.
I-
There's
I-
I'm
her
pretty
chest
sure
isn't
there's
cut
a
open.
blueprint shot, but it's pretty obvious that they're
Yeah.
putting stuff in her arms and legs.
I don't necessarily think every character's tone or story fits or needs to be rated R.
No,
Like, it
absolutely,
does-
yeah.
But so just since we're focused on the little girl right here, she had the potential to be such an annoying, terrible
Yeah.
character,
She was
as
great.
a lot of child characters often do. The way they handled her character was fantastic.
they didn't let her
They're-
talk. It was really smart.
Yeah,
You're right,
they're-
Elyse. Thank you.
I mean, it's true. The fact that she was mute for half the movie,
Helped a lot.
a mutant, helped a lot. And the relationship between them could have been horribly cheesy or contrived, and it felt actually genuine.
It did.
The emotion between them. I thought that was great.
It was actually very similar to the relationship in Waterworld between Kevin Costner and a little girl.
Scholar.
One podcast. Just
Critically and financially very similar. as
Claimed.
well.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the thing is, this is just a things working. Logan is an example of things working. You know, it wasn't everything, but I think
Most.
stuff,
Yeah.
and for me,
The most important stuff.
all I needed, it all worked. It's a tropey plot that we've seen 1,000 times.
Yeah.
It's the road trip with the father figure and the daughter going along their little journey and stuff like I literally watched Jack Reacher Never Go Back. It's the same plot.
Yeah.
It's the same plot as this,
But
right?
it had interesting characters. It had an interesting setting.
It's Last of Us. It's Telltale's Walking Dead, like season 1 or whatever. It's been done 100 times, but man,
Look.
they didn't have to
So
talk
sad.
in this one. The worst part about Jack Reacher is every single time the little girl, not the little
She
girl,
opens her
she's
mouth.
like a teenager. She
Yeah.
opens her mouth. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I don't care.
No, she's just plucky, and she may have an attitude, but she
Yeah.
can back it up.
Well, here's
Yeah.
the thing is that's such a weird, because like with this movie, rely on the actors that have been actors for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? Don't give the little girl a bunch of lines
Yeah.
that has never acted before. And they did that.
And you do little things. She does plenty of things to show off her character silently and stuff like that. Like you get a sense of who she is
still
and
a
her
great
kind of
actress,
tendencies
yeah.
and stuff like that. Like her going to the convenience store and being like, these glasses.
Yeah.
I want these glasses are silent little subtle things. And then it's like,
They did, yeah.
if you're an adult and you, like, I don't have a kid, but if you're thinking, you're like, oh, that would be exhausting.
Yeah.
Chasing this little rat all over the place and stuff like that. But then you can also be like, but she's kind of cool.
Yeah,
You know,
no, she's definitely cool.
The other movies like this, a lot of times tell you Like, let me tell you how cool this
How edgy
character
this
is.
child is.
They're so cool. They're gonna get. I'm gonna go in there and get glasses, and they have an argument. And you're watching an argument. It sucks.
Well, I believe that brings us to the end.
Oh, I didn't mean to go out on such a shitty critical
man.
note.
No,
you
it's
were
okay.
right, though.
I think. I mean, like.
That's just a nitpick observation. I'm just glad she doesn't talk.
Yeah.
Because I like her.
I really enjoyed the movie. I think it had some minor pacing issues, and I had, I walked away with a few questions, but I think only because I care. So I ended up enjoying it. I recommend seeing it, even though we just spoiled the shit out of it.
And it's been out for.
You should definitely
3
see
weeks.
it. This movie's totally worth seeing in theaters.
It's absolutely worth seeing in theaters. So.
The man
And I'm
comes
excited.
around.
It sucks because like I shit on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I'm excited for what other things are gonna do.
Oh yeah.
Because like if X-Men had already gone to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we'd probably get a pretty paint by numbers X-Men movie by now. It might be really cool and people might really love it, but this is just like. This is something that only exists outside of that system. I really hope that Marvel gets to the point where they're like, we have so much, we have a base.
Just do whatever.
Let's just throw some outliers out there. They tried for it with like television and like Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica
Fist.
Jones and
Iron
stuff.
Fist, too.
But those still feel very safe, cartoony things to me. So
Very TV. Cool. Well, thank you guys for being on this podcast. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Thank you, Blue Apron, for sponsoring said podcast. Couldn't have done it without you.
and thanks to Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart and Robo Hand.
Hugh Jackman, will you sign us off?
Oh.
Goodbye. Good day. Go bye. Go bye.
Just like he says at the end of the movie.
Yeah, Black Bolt.
He's just naming all the black.
But he's a white.
all the
Yeah.
black.
He's a white
He's a white
alien
guy.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, he can't talk, otherwise he kills
But it's
people.
just because it has black in the title, Adam.
That's what he's saying.
What? No,
I know.
no. That's your
I'm just calling
white
it.
guilt.
Anyway,
Bruce.
case closed.
in.
How many
White
white
guilt,
guilts
huh?
out of 10 would you give it?
I haven't even seen the movie.
Bruce, how many?
10.